Nearly 60% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency without borrowing. Not the unemployed, not the destitute. Working adults, people with jobs, paychecks, and bank accounts. That number comes from a Bankrate survey conducted over multiple years, and it has barely moved. The question is not why people are struggling. The question is why nobody ever told them the rules that actually govern money. Schools teach reading. They teach algebra. In some places, they even teach the periodic table. But the rules that determine whether a person builds wealth or bleeds money quietly for decades, those go unspoken. And that silence is not accidental. Most people learn about money from the people around them, parents, friends, colleagues, and unless those people understood money deeply, what gets passed down is a set of habits dressed up as wisdom. Work hard, save a little, spend what is left. That is the template. And for most people, that template leads nowhere. So what are the rules that actually work? What do the financially stable know that the financially stuck do not? The first rule is one that changes everything once understood. Income is not wealth. This sounds simple. It feels obvious when said out loud. But the behavior of millions of people reveals that almost nobody truly believes it. Research from the Federal Reserve consistently shows that high-income households often carry significant debt, low savings rates, and negative net worth. A person earning $200,000 a year who spends $210,000 is not wealthy. They are simply broke at a higher speed. Wealth is not what flows in. Wealth is what stays. The distinction between income and net worth is the first rule nobody teaches, and the failure to internalize it is why so many high earners retire with almost nothing. The second rule is about the invisible tax that nobody calls a tax. It is called lifestyle inflation, and it works like this. A person gets a raise. They upgrade their car, they move to a nicer apartment, they eat at better restaurants, life improves, and that feels like progress. But their savings rate stays the same, or drops. Every income increase gets absorbed by a corresponding increase in spending. The raise never becomes wealth, it becomes a new baseline. Research from Salary Finance, which analyzed the financial behavior of over 100,000 workers, found that income level alone was a poor predictor of financial stress. Workers earning high salaries reported nearly the same rates of financial anxiety as those earning far less. The reason was almost always the same. Spending had risen in lockstep with income. The third rule is counterintuitive, and many people resist it. Debt is a tool. Used wrongly, it is the fastest path to financial ruin. Used correctly, it is how most significant wealth gets built. The wealthy have understood this for generations. The middle class was taught the opposite. There is a meaningful difference between debt that consumes and debt that creates. A car loan on a depreciating vehicle is debt that consumes. It costs money every month and produces nothing. A mortgage on a property that appreciates while a tenant covers the payment is debt that creates. It builds equity, generates income, and expands net worth over time. Behavioral economists call this the distinction between liability debt and productive debt. And yet most financial education, when it exists at all, treats all debt as identical. Pay it off. Avoid it. Fear it. That blanket message closes off entire categories of wealth building that require understanding leverage, not just avoiding it. The fourth rule is about compounding, and most people think they already understand it. They do not. Not really. Compounding is not just an investment concept. It is a behavioral trap. When it works in someone's favor, it quietly multiplies wealth over decades. When it works against them, in the form of credit card interest, it quietly destroys it. A study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research examined how people mentally account for compound interest. The findings were stark. Most people dramatically underestimate how quickly debt compounds and equally underestimate how significantly early investment compounds over time. The numbers involved in both cases are not linear. They are exponential, and the human brain is simply not wired to feel exponential growth or decay in real time. What this means practically is that someone who delays investing by 10 years does not lose 10 years of returns. They lose the compounding that would have built on those returns, and the compounding that would have built on that compounding. The math is brutal. A person who invests consistently from age 25 to 35 and then stops will often end up with more at retirement than someone who starts at 35 and invests every single year until 65. That is not intuition. That is mathematics. and nobody teaches it. The fifth rule is about taxes, not how to file them, how to think about them. Taxes are not fixed. They are negotiable, not in a dishonest sense, but in the sense that the structure of income determines how much of it gets taken. A salaried employee has almost no control over their tax rate. Their income is ordinary income, taxed at the highest rates. But investment income, capital gains, and business income are taxed differently, often dramatically differently. The Tax Policy Center has published extensive analysis showing that the effective tax rates paid by the wealthiest Americans are often lower than those paid by upper-middle-class earners. Not because of loopholes or corruption, but because the type of income matters as much as the amount. Ordinary workers earn wages. Wealthy individuals engineer income. That distinction is the fifth rule, and most people spend their entire working lives without ever encountering it. The sixth rule is about risk, and it is perhaps the most misunderstood of all. Most people are taught to fear risk, and in some contexts, that fear is healthy. But in the context of long-term wealth building, the avoidance of risk is itself a risk. Keeping money in a savings account feels safe. It is not. Inflation erodes purchasing power year after year. The money that feels secure is quietly shrinking in real terms. Research from Vanguard and other long-term investment analysts consistently shows that the biggest threat to the retirement savings of ordinary workers is not market crashes. It is staying out of the market entirely, or exiting during downturns and missing the recoveries that historically follow. The fear of losing money leads to behavior that guarantees losing money. That is the paradox of financial risk that nobody explains. The seventh rule is the quietest and possibly the most powerful. Networks determine net worth, not in a transactional sense, in an informational one. The people in a person's immediate circle shape what they know about money, what they believe is possible, and what strategies they even know exist. Studies from behavioral economics researchers at the University of California found that peer groups are among the strongest predictors of financial behavior. People normalize the financial habits of those around them without realizing it. This is not about abandoning relationships. It is about understanding that information has value and that access to the right conversations, the right questions, and the right frameworks is not equally distributed. Someone who grew up in a household that discussed asset allocation, tax strategy, and investment vehicles was absorbing a financial education that most people never receive. And for everyone else, the gap is not talent. It is information. The rules that govern money are not secret. They are not hidden behind locked doors or exclusive memberships. They are simply unspoken. They do not appear in school curricula. They rarely come up at dinner tables in most households. And so generation after generation learns to earn, spend, and repeat without ever understanding the architecture underneath. Nearly 60% of people cannot cover a $1,000 emergency. That is not a failure of effort. It is a failure of knowledge. And knowledge, unlike talent, unlike opportunity, unlike so much else, is something that can always be acquired. The rules exist. They always have. And now you know them.